Snow falls heavy on the cobblestones of Ethelgard, burying a secret that could shatter a kingdom. Banished to freeze with child, a lowly servant girl swore she would never look back. Now the almighty Alpha King crawls through the frost, begging for the very salvation he threw away. Winter in the year 1342 did not merely arrive in the High Ridge Mountains. It descended like a vengeful spirit. The colossal stone walls of Castle Ethelgard, ancient seat of the Silvermane pack, offered little refuge from the biting gales. Inside the servants' quarters, Maeve wrapped her thin woolen shawl tighter around her trembling shoulders. She was nothing more than a scullery maid, an orphan born to the lower echelons of the pack, but beneath her heart she carried a royal secret that was becoming impossible to hide. Cassian, the newly crowned Alpha King, was a man forged in battle and burdened by the crown. Just 6 months prior, before his father's sudden demise in the border wars, Cassian had been simply the fierce warrior prince. In the quiet, moonlit shadows of the castle gardens, away from the prying eyes of the nobility, he and Maeve had found solace in one another. It was an intoxicating, forbidden romance. They had whispered promises under the ancient willow tree, bound by an invisible string that felt suspiciously like a true mating bond. But destiny, as it often does in the brutal medieval world, demanded a different path. Upon his coronation, the Council of Elders forced Cassian's hand. The Silvermane pack was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy and war. To secure their borders, Cassian was betrothed to Lady Seraphina of the Iron Claw pack, a woman as famously beautiful as she was notoriously cruel. From the moment Seraphina's gilded carriage rolled through the iron gates, the castle shifted. Maeve was pushed back into the shadows, forced to watch the man she loved stand beside a haughty noblewoman. Cassian's gaze would sometimes linger on Maeve during banquets filled with silent apologies and restrained longing, but he belonged to the realm now. Then the morning sickness began. Maeve tried to conceal it. She chewed ginger root and worked double shifts in the kitchens, keeping her head down. But Hildegard, the eagle-eyed headmaid, noticed Maeve's expanding waistline and pale complexion. Desperate to curry favor with the future queen, Hildegard reported her suspicions directly to Lady Seraphina. Seraphina was no fool. She had seen the lingering looks between the king and the maid. A royal bastard, especially one born before her own legitimate heirs, would be a political disaster and a threat to her absolute power. Seraphina did not just want Maeve gone. She wanted her entirely discredited, ensuring Cassian would never look for her. With ruthless precision, Seraphina orchestrated a devastating plot. She bribed a disgraced low-ranking guard named Bastian, a man known for his loose morals and gambling debts. For a heavy pouch of gold florins, Bastian agreed to play the part. The trap was sprung on the eve of the winter solstice, the most sacred night for the wolf packs, where the entire court gathered in the great hall. The hearths roared, casting flickering shadows over the tapestries. Cassian sat on his carved wooden throne, looking exhausted and distant, while Seraphina sat beside him, radiating false warmth. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors banged open. Seraphina's personal guards dragged a terrified Maeve into the center of the hall, throwing her to the cold stone floor. A collective gasp rippled through the gathered nobility. "My king!" Seraphina announced, her voice dripping with mock sorrow. "I bring before you a grievous betrayal. This maid who has eaten from your kitchens and lived under your protection has desecrated our sacred halls. She is with child, and the father is a traitor." Cassian's golden eyes snapped to Maeve. His heart hammered against his ribs, his inner wolf clawing at his chest. He knew the child was his. He was prepared in that agonizing moment to claim her to face the wrath of the council and the Iron Claws. He half rose from his throne, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. Enough, Seraphina. What is the meaning of this? Bring him in, Seraphina commanded. Guards hauled Bastian forward. The man dropped to his knees, keeping his head bowed. Forgive me, Alpha, Bastian stammered, reciting the lies he had memorized. The maid, Maeve and I. We lay together in the stables for months. She told me the pup was mine, but then I found these. Seraphina's advisor stepped forward, handing Cassian a bundle of parchment. Cassian's eyes scanned the pages. They were love letters perfectly forged, detailing a plot between Maeve and Bastian to sell castle secrets to rogue wolves to fund their escape, using her pregnancy to extort the crown. Maeve looked up, tears freezing on her cheeks. No, Cassian. Please, you know the truth. I have never touched this man. The letters are lies. Cassian's mind spun into a chaotic vortex. The handwriting matched Maeve's perfectly. Seraphina had made sure of it by stealing Maeve's inventory ledgers. The betrayal stung like venom. His inner wolf, possessive and volatile, roared in agonizing jealousy. He looked at Maeve, his soul aching, desperately wanting to believe her, but the evidence of her treason was right in his hands, witnessed by the entire ruling council. The political pressure was a vice around his throat. If he showed leniency to a confessed traitor and a supposedly unfaithful lover, a rebellion would fracture the pack by morning. Is it true? Cassian whispered, his voice cracking barely audible over the roaring fire. Did you lie to me? I only ever loved you. Maeve sobbed her hands, clutching her belly. The child is yours. Please look at me. Seraphina sneered. She uses your noble heart against you, my king. A treacherous whore who sleeps with the guards and plots with rogues. The law demands death. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the great hall. Cassian looked at the council, at Seraphina, and finally at the trembling woman on the floor. His heart shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. He could not execute her. He couldn't bring himself to end the life of the woman he loved, even if he believed she had betrayed him. But he could not let her stay. Cassian stood his face, a mask of hardened ice, burying his agony beneath the mantle of the Alpha King. Death is too merciful for a traitor. He boomed, his voice echoing off the stone walls, though it cost him every ounce of his strength. Maeve of the lower wards, you are stripped of your pack affiliation. You are hereby banished from the lands of Ethelgard. You will be cast into the White Wastes. If you ever return, you will be hunted down as a rogue. Maeve's scream tore through the hall, a sound of such profound heartbreak that even the hardiest warriors flinched. Guards seized her arms. She fought, thrashing and crying out Cassian's name, but the Alpha King turned his back, staring blindly into the roaring flames of the hearth as the heavy oak doors slammed shut behind her, sealing her fate in the dead of winter. The White Wastes earned their name. It was a desolate, jagged expanse of frozen tundra, where the wind howled like mourning ghosts, and the snowdrifts were deep enough to swallow a horse whole. Cast out with nothing but the clothes on her back and a meager sack of stale bread, Maeve trudged through the blinding blizzard. The cold was an agonizing physical force, biting through her thin leather boots and turning her extremities numb. Every step was a battle of will. She wrapped her arms protectively around her swollen stomach, murmuring reassurances to the life growing inside her. I will not let you die, she whispered to the wind, her lips cracked and bleeding. You are born of kings. You will survive this. For 3 days and 3 nights, Maeve wandered the frozen hellscape. She survived by eating handfuls of snow and digging beneath the roots of dead pines for frozen moss. But human and even werewolf endurance has its limits. On the 4th evening, as the sky bruised into a dark, unforgiving purple, her legs gave out. She collapsed into a snowbank, the frost creeping up her veins, pulling her into a seductive, deadly sleep. When she opened her eyes again, she was not in the afterlife. She was surrounded by the scent of wood smoke and dried lavender. Maeve found herself in a sturdy, warm log cabin. A roaring oviar crackled in the hearth. Sitting by the fire was an imposing figure, an elderly man with a face cross-hatched by battle scars and a missing left eye. This was Calen, the exiled alpha of the long-forgotten Pinecrest Pack, a man who had chosen a life of hermitage over the bloody politics of the major clans. "Drink," Calen grunted, pressing a steaming mug of bone broth to her lips. "You have the stubbornness of a dire wolf girl. I found you half buried near the Howling Ridge. Another hour and the frost would have taken you both." Under Calen's gruff but fierce protection, Maeve slowly recovered. He recognized the tragedy in her eyes and asked no questions about her past, offering her sanctuary in his hidden valley, a place shielded from the worst of the winter storms by geothermal springs. 2 months later, as the first signs of a harsh spring attempted to break through the frost, Maeve went into labor. It was a grueling, terrifying night, but as dawn broke, the cries of a newborn filled the small cabin. Maeve held her son to her chest, tears of sheer joy streaming down her face. She named him Leo. As Calen leaned in to inspect the boy, he went entirely still. The infant opened his eyes, revealing irises of pure, striking liquid gold, the unmistakable legendary trait of the Ethelgard royal bloodline. And there on the back of the infant's left shoulder was a birthmark shaped like a silver crescent moon. "By the ancestors," Calen whispered, pulling back in reverence. "You didn't just sleep with a noble girl. You carry the king's true heir." Maeve looked down at Leo, tracing the crescent mark. "He is my son," she said fiercely, "and the king will never know him." While Maeve found a quiet, rugged peace in exile, Castle Ethelgard was rotting from the inside out. 2 years had passed since Maeve's banishment, and King Cassian was a shadow of his former self. The pack was suffering. The crops had failed. The rivers yielded little fish, and a palpable gloom hung over the kingdom. The elders whispered that the moon goddess had cursed the Alpha. Cassian's marriage to Seraphina was a toxic, barren wasteland. They slept in separate chambers. Seraphina's cruelty had alienated the servants and the council alike, and despite her frantic efforts, she had failed to produce an heir. Cassian spent his nights prowling the battlements in his wolf form, howling into the dark, his soul plagued by an emptiness he could not fill. He missed Maeve with a visceral agony that made it hard to breathe. The turning point came on a dreary Tuesday morning. Auriel Cassian's loyal beta and closest confidant had been auditing the royal treasury to prepare for the spring trade. He uncovered a massive discrepancy in the accounts from 2 years prior, a sum of gold withdrawn directly by Seraphina's hand on the exact day before Maeve's trial. Suspicious Auriel dug deeper. He tracked the serial numbers of the missing florins to the gambling dens in the lower city, specifically to the debts paid off by Bastian the guard who had accused Maeve. Auriel brought the ledgers directly to the king's solar. Cassian sat by the window, staring out at the distant snow-capped peaks. "My king," Auriel said softly, placing the heavy leather-bound book on the desk. "I have found something. Something concerning the queen and the night the maid was exiled." Cassian's head snapped over his golden eyes, flashing with a dangerous, predatory light. "Speak." When Auriel laid out the evidence, the withdrawal, the sudden payment of Bastian's massive debts, the impossibility of Maeve stealing the inventory ledgers, she didn't have access to the temperature in the room, plummeted. Cassian didn't wait. He stormed through the castle like an avenging god, the sheer force of his alpha aura, forcing guards and servants to their knees as he passed. He found Bastian in the barracks, laughing over a game of dice. Cassian's hand shot out, lifting the guard by the throat, single-handedly. He slammed Bastion against the stone wall, the masonry cracking under the impact. Cassian's eyes bled from gold to the glowing, unnatural crimson of an enraged alpha wolf. "The truth!" Cassian growled, his canines elongating, pressing into Bastion's windpipe. "Tell me the truth about Maeve, or I will tear your throat out with my teeth right now." Terrified, choking, and realizing the Queen could no longer protect him, Bastion broke instantly. "Mercy Alpha. Mercy, it was a lie. The Queen paid me. The letters were forged by her scribes. Maeve never touched me. She swore the child was yours." Cassian dropped the man. The revelation hit him with the force of a battering ram. The breath was knocked from his lungs. He stumbled back, clutching his chest as a roar of pure, unadulterated anguish ripped from his throat. The sound echoed through the entire castle, a sound of a mate realizing he had destroyed his own soul. He had condemned the only woman he ever loved. He had thrown his pregnant mate into the freezing wasteland to die alone. The child, his heir, was out there in the ice, or worse, dead, because of his blinding, foolish pride. Within the hour, Seraphina was dragged screaming from her chambers, stripped of her royal silks, and thrown into the deepest dungeon of Ethelgard pending trial for high treason. But Cassian found no satisfaction in her screams. He assembled his most elite trackers. He did not care that 2 years had passed. He did not care if he had to turn every stone in the High Ridge Mountains into dust. He would find her. "Prepare the horses," Cassian ordered Auriel, fastening his thick fur cloak, his eyes wild and desperate. "We ride for the White Wastes, and we do not return until I find my queen." Blizzards in the White Wastes did not forgive trespassers, not even kings. For 6 grueling weeks, Cassian and his elite guard rode through the unforgiving tundra, their massive dire wolf mounts sinking up to their chests in snowdrifts. The biting frost gnawed at their armor, and the relentless wind threatened to strip the very flesh from their bones. Alongside Cassian rode Auriel, his beta, and Lady Beatrice, the finest tracker in the High Ridge Mountains. Hope was a fragile, dwindling ember. They found nothing but frozen corpses of wild game and abandoned rogue camps. The elders back at Castle Ethelgard were already sending ravens pleading for the Alpha King to return before the neighboring kingdom of Wessex, ruled by the ruthless King Edward, sensed their vulnerability and declared war. But Cassian ignored them all. He was a man, possessed, driven by a soul-deep, gnawing agony. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Maeve's final shattering scream echoing off the walls of the great hall. The turning point came on the 42nd day of their expedition. The royal party was ambushed in a narrow ravine known as the Devil's Throat. A pack of 20 starved, desperate rogue wolves descended from the cliffs, their eyes wild with hunger. Cassian did not command his guards to defend him. He welcomed the violence. He unsheathed his massive Ulfbert broadsword, a legendary blade forged from pure crucible steel by real master smiths of the old world, and charged directly into the fray. He fought like a demon, unchained his inner wolf, unleashed in a brutal ballet of blood and silver. When the snow finally settled, stained crimson, only one rogue remained alive, crawling backward away from the Alpha King. Cassian lifted the rogue by the scruff of his filthy tunic, his golden eyes glowing with lethal intent. "I am looking for a woman." Cassian growled his voice, a gravelly menace. "A banished maid with dark hair. She would have crossed these lands 2 years ago." The rogue choked, spitting blood onto the pristine snow. "A woman you seek, the ghost of the valley. We saw her. The old hermit, Caelan, took her in. They live in the thermal springs, past the howling ridge. She is no maid, King. She is a witch. She birthed a demon pup with eyes like molten gold." Cassian's heart stopped. The world around him faded into a muted, ringing silence. A pup with eyes like molten gold. He dropped the rogue and turned toward the howling ridge, a sudden explosive surge of adrenaline masking his exhaustion. "Mount up!" Cassian roared, his voice cracking with desperate emotion. "We ride!" It took 2 more days to breach the treacherous mountain passes, but when they finally crested the ridge, the howling winds abruptly died down. Below them lay a hidden, verdant valley, warmed by ancient geothermal springs. It was a pocket of impossible spring amidst an ocean of eternal winter. Cassian dismounted his legs, trembling. He left his guards at the ridge and descended into the valley alone. The scent hit him before he even saw the cabin, the faint, delicate aroma of wildflowers and rain. It was her. It was his mate. As he approached a sturdy log cabin near a bubbling hot spring, he stopped dead in his tracks. Sitting in the lush grass was a little boy no more than 2 years old. He was laughing, tossing a wooden toy wolf into the air. He had a mop of dark, unruly hair, but when the boy turned to look at the rustling bushes, Cassian saw them. Eyes of brilliant, luminescent gold, the undeniable mark of the Silvermane royal bloodline. Cassian's knees felt weak. A profound, overwhelming wave of love and profound regret crashed over him. Leo time to wash up. The voice was a familiar melody, yet laced with a new, hardened steel. Maeve emerged from the cabin. She was no longer the frail, terrified scullery maid, draped in coarse, oversized wool. She wore fitted leather armor, crafted from deer hide, a magnificent cloak of white wolf fur draped over her shoulders, and a beautifully carved ashwood recurve bow slung across her back. Her face was flushed, radiant, and fiercely beautiful. She looked every inch a queen. Cassian stepped out of the tree line, his armor clanking softly. Maeve froze. The basket of wild berries she was holding slipped from her grasp, spilling red fruit across the green grass. Her breath hitched her dark eyes, widening in shock, and then almost instantly hardening into ice. "Cassian!" She breathed the name, slicing through the crisp air like a dagger. Before Cassian could even speak, Maeve's hand darted over her shoulder. In one fluid, lightning-fast motion, she notched an arrow, drew the bowstring to her cheek, and aimed the iron-tipped shaft directly at the center of his chest. "Take one more step, Alpha," Maeve warned, her voice deadly calm, "and I will put this arrow through your heart." Cassian did not flinch. He did not raise his hands in defense or command her to lower her weapon. Instead, he unbuckled his sword belt, letting the heavy Ulfbert blade fall to the dirt. He dropped his shield. He unclasped his royal fur cloak, letting the symbol of his authority pool at his feet. Slowly, deliberately, the almighty Alpha King of Ethelgard dropped to his knees in the dirt before her. "Then shoot Maeve," Cassian said, his voice breaking tears, finally spilling over his battle-scarred cheeks. "Put the arrow through my heart. It has belonged to you since the day I cast you out, and it beats only for you. If my death brings you peace, then take it." Maeve's hands trembled on the bowstring. The raw, unfiltered agony in his voice struck her like a physical blow, but the scars of her banishment ran too deep. "You threw me to the wolves," she cried, tears blurring her vision. "You condemned me and your unborn child to freeze in the wasteland. You chose a crown and a lying noblewoman over your true mate." "I was blind." Cassian choked out, bowing his head until his forehead touched the damp earth. "I was a coward, paralyzed by the council and the laws I was sworn to uphold. Seraphina paid the guard. She forged the letters. The day I discovered the truth, I threw her into the darkest dungeon of the keep. She awaits execution for high treason." Cassian slowly lifted his head, his golden eyes locking onto hers, pleading for a mercy he knew he did not deserve. I tore my kingdom apart to find you. I am not here as your King Maeve. I am here as a broken man, a mate who destroyed his own soul. I am begging you. Punish me. Torture me. But please let me know, my son." Hearing the commotion, the old hermit, Caelan, stepped out of the cabin, an ancient battle-axe resting casually on his shoulder. He took in the sight of the kneeling king. "Well," Caelan grunted, spitting a wad of tobacco leaf into the bushes. "I suppose you finally grew a spine, boy." Little Leo, confused by the strange man crying in the dirt, waddled over to Cassian. He tilted his head, his golden eyes blinking innocently. "Why is the big man crying, Mama?" Cassian let out a wrecked sob at the sound of the boy's voice. He kept his hands planted firmly on the ground, terrified to reach out, terrified he would frighten the child. He slowly bared his throat, the ultimate instinctive sign of absolute submission from an alpha wolf. He surrendered his life, his pack, and his power to the woman standing before him. Maeve stared at the man she had once loved with reckless abandon, the man who had shattered her now, utterly humbled at her feet. She lowered the bow. The tension in the air was so thick it could be cut with a knife. "If I return," Maeve spoke, her voice ringing with absolute authority, "I do not return to the kitchens. I do not return to the shadows. I will not be your secret Cassian." Cassian looked up, his eyes shining with desperate, terrifying hope. "You will be my queen, the Luna of the Silvermane pack. I will crown you before the entire realm. Anyone who refuses to bow to you will answer to my blade." Maeve looked at Caelan, who offered a slow, approving nod. She looked down at Leo, who was now curiously poking at Cassian's discarded shield. Finally, she looked back at Cassian. The bond, fractured and bruised, sparked to life in her chest once more. "Get up, Cassian," Maeve commanded, extending a hand to him. "We have a kingdom to fix." Their return to Castle Ethelgard was the stuff of legends whispered about from the taverns of London to the grand courts of Wessex. When Cassian rode through the iron gates, he did not ride alone. Beside him rode Maeve, draped in royal furs, her chin held high, holding the golden-eyed heir to the throne. The council of elders who had once sneered at the scullery maid were forced to kneel in the mud as she passed. Seraphina was dragged to the courtyard, screaming curses, only to be formally stripped of her titles and banished to the very white wastes she had intended for Maeve. That evening, beneath the light of a full silver moon, Maeve was crowned Lunar Queen of Ethelgard. She ruled not with the cruelty of her predecessor, but with a fierce, unwavering justice forged in the frozen wilderness. And Cassian, the Alpha King, who had almost lost everything, spent the rest of his days proving his devotion, ensuring that the cold would never touch his family again. Did Maeve's fierce transformation and Cassian's desperate redemption leave you breathless? The white wastes forge the strongest queens, and this Alpha learned his lesson the hard way. If you loved this tale of betrayal, exile, and ultimate power, don't forget to hit that like button, share this epic romance with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling werewolf dramas and breathtaking stories. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a wild twist.